Hi, everyone. It's Emmie Arnold, the voice behind Lectionary in a Human Voice. So you might recognize my voice from me saying, hi, everyone. Welcome to Lectionary in a Human Voice. You may also recognize me as communications manager at First Presbyterian Church of Glen Cove, or someone who has shared some of my writings and reflections and done an interview with Pastor Lance before. So it's a joy to be on the podcast again. And I wanted to share a little bit about how Lectionary in a Human Voice, reading the lectionary for y'all every Tuesday morning, has been really impacting my own faith. So I started this series as a way of making the Bible more interesting to listen to, because I have heard so many boring readings of the Bible. And when I was in seminary, we actually took a speech class on doing engaging readings of the Bible. And so every time I hear a boring Bible reader, I want to just like slam my head against something. And I know that that's a very, very seminary thing to do, to be judging other people's voices. But, sometimes it's easier to listen to the Bible when it's read by a person, first of all. And it's read by a person with an interesting voice. Hopefully you've been finding the podcast to be read with, appropriate intonation and passion, etc. Because that's what I aim to bring to it. But so I started it out of a desire for people to be able to hear the Bible more. I am an Enneagram 2. I don't know if y'all have ever heard of that personality test, but the Enneagram is something that identifies a core hope in each person. And there are 9 different types, and I am Enneagram type 2, which is the helper. And so I initially started this series as a way of helping other people read, understand, and enjoy the Bible. I got the idea from Father Mike Schmitz, who's doing the Bible in a Year podcast, where he literally reads chapters and chapters and chapters each day and gives a short reflection. I don't always agree with the reflections, because everyone has different theology, but just listening to the Bible read in an interesting voice and getting to hear it all the way through is really inspiring. And so I decided to do a smaller version of that in reading the weekly lectionary, a collection of about 4 passages, some of them connected to another passage. That's common within liturgical churches or churches that follow a holiday calendar. And so something that's interesting about the lectionary is that it's so common across Protestant churches. And so oftentimes churches will preach from lectionary passages. And so if you go to an Episcopal church anywhere in the country, they're reading these passages. If you go to any liturgical church in the country or around the world, they're reading these passages, or at least some of these passages. And I just find that really inspiring. And so I wanted us to feel like we were part of that rich tradition. And again, I wanted to help other people engage with the Bible more. Since Glenwood Table is about exploring spirituality, especially spirituality, oftentimes from a Christian perspective, regardless of how you grew up, regardless of how certain things happened or didn't happen in your faith life. So I did it to help people. And it has been so formative for my own faith. I often find that when I think that I'm going to help others, I end up being the one who's helped more. And part of it is because I didn't grow up religious at all. And so, the basic Sunday school Bible knowledge is not something I grew up with. The first sort of like deep dive I had into the Bible was in evangelical churches that sort of did like 45-minute long sermons with long expositions, and oftentimes 14-week-long series in one book. So we did like a series going through the Gospel of Mark slowly. That wasn't a liturgical church. And so they just picked which passages they felt like doing, which has something lovely in that too. But so that was how I started, was sort of like deep dives into one book. And then when I went to seminary, I had to learn like hard information about the Bible so that I could understand and teach the Bible in a really just sort of like formative and fulfilling way, in a way that really honors the original texts and doesn't just smush them into this idea of Bible as inerrant word written by one person, God breathed, God holding pen in men's hands. And I say men very specifically because it's pretty much always men writing. I like to believe that some of the Psalms were written by women. And some people believe that the Gospel of Luke might even have been written by a woman. But anyway, that's a transcript. That's a whole other thing for a whole other day. But so I had these two very specific sort of introductions to the Bible. One was through, these deep dive series in evangelical churches, and another was through seminary, just like intense Bible knowledge. And this has been such a wonderful change from those things. Just reading it and seeing the connections. The lectionary passages are often meant to be connected together for whatever season it is in the Christian calendar. And when you have, for example, an Old Testament passage combined with a psalm, oftentimes they look like they go together. Whether the psalm was actually written in a similar time to the passage, they go together pretty well. And so it's been really beautiful for me to sort of see different parts of the Bible coming together and being like, oh, wow, look, these Psalms really related to events happening in the community, not just on a personal level, but realizing that Psalms are both personal, communal, and global. And knowing always that millions of people have prayed them before, but that these Psalms were around during these times. That's just been really special for me. And each of the lectionary years focuses on a particular gospel. And it appears that the current one has Mark as its primary source. And that has just been really cool because it's, one day passage in Mark 5, the next day or the next week passage in Mark 6, just sort of like slowly reading my way through. Even though not all the passages are covered in the lectionary, and in fact, some of the harder passages of the Bible are hidden from the lectionary, which is unfortunate, but like a lot of the Bible is hit in the 3-year lectionary cycle. And so seeing this progression throughout the gospel, seeing how different epistles connect, seeing how different Psalms connect, has just been really lovely for me. And despite needing to edit things because I mispronounced names or needing to create social media images and all those different sort of, just sort of mundane tasks that go with it, I've really looked forward to it every week, learning these passages, reading these passages, digesting these passages, and then speaking them to you, our listeners. And yet, perhaps the one who's been most helped by this project is me. And I thank God that when we help others, we too change. And so thank you so much for listening to Lectionary in a Human Voice. If you haven't already been doing so, I invite you to do so. They come out every Tuesday morning, and I've just been having so much fun with them. And I pray that they are a blessing to you and that you have fun with them too, and realize that the Bible is a living, breathing document, that even though it was written thousands of years ago and over thousands of years, a combination of 66 books, sort of like piecemeal and yet a whole, I pray that this has made the Bible more approachable, more interesting, more relatable, even just to be able to include it in your weekly life, and hopefully even more frequently. And so thank you for listening. And I appreciate y'all. And I'm grateful that in reading to you, I'm reading to me. Bye for now.